right to, that intersection of your child's school. From there, there's likely people in your community. Often I hear my mom actually is telling me a lot of things because she watches the news religiously. So she's like, I saw this and that, So often they're trying to reach you and you're trying to reach them, and it's mainly about taking that initiative to find that synergy.
Right. I can understand that. Okay, so I got a question. I'm gonna say it's almost like a personal question. So within our community here within Albany, New York, for those of you who don't know, if you could change one problem area in our community, what would that be, or what would that look like?
I would say because, we talked about how it's really a lot of multifaceted issues. So there's the issues of I don't want to call them decline, but it's more like benign neglect. These communities that everyone's divested from the banks to institutions, or suddenly there's an interest in another. Suddenly, the reverse can also happen. Suddenly, there's an interest in your community, and you could be gentrified out. So that's one issue. There's the issue of our health disparities as a people. Even with moms, the statistics for Black moms to have some kind of maternal morbidity or infant mortality issue is very high, and let's just blow it back even more. Let's extrapolate up higher. It's kind of related to, of course, the institution of racism in our society. How we were formed as a society was based off of this disparity that was sewed into it by favoring one group in the form of another. That led to generational wealth. That led to generational poverty in some cases too. So understanding that, I don't like to look at it as like, what can I pick and choose? I do work on things in different groups in different ways. I like to say I'm a member of many families. For example, I'm a proud member, former fellow of New Leaders Council, and I graduated in 2017. Never thinking that I would run for an office or campaign ever. Just sort of trying to say, how can I develop myself professionally, but also tap into the civic engagement concept that I've always been a part of in my whole life. So that led to one thing to another, where I sort of understood how people can just sort of, back to taking responsibility, take an initiative in your community and say, where can I apply myself? I saw myself being able to apply myself to the school board because of understanding what the contribution of time was required, understanding sort of like the proximity I have to the issues, being someone who graduated and grew up here. So that's how I came to be personally involved in that particular thing. But I find myself involved in many things because it's actually like a running joke with people who know me that I'm always busy. I promise you, I only do what I have the energy for. Like, I promise you. But like another issue that I became interested in after learning more about it was obviously maternal morbidity and mortality issues with women. So with NICEPAC, I'm currently doing that with a colleague. We're researching that, how to basically, what are the issues? Where's the lay of the land from the state, federal level, and what can we do in terms of resources and things that are concrete to help people to change this? So I find that you kind of apply yourself in what you're interested in, because I find this to be a multi-dimensional, multifaceted war on all these things, all the isms, really. Ableism, the inability to include people. Accessibility is a huge issue. So when we plan things, are we planning it to be totally accessible? Ageism, making sure that these are multi-generational events. If we're having them, they're applicable to everyone, whether young, someone with a child, someone who, maybe an elder that is still intergenerational and inclusive. Sexism naturally, and all the other isms, and racism. We're trying to basically sort of chisel away at these things slowly with different groups. In my view, that's how I end up doing so many things and contributing whatever talent I can to the situation.
When do you sleep?
Funny enough, my daughter's in bed she's a baby still, so she's kind of up all day, and then she sleeps at 10 till the morning. So I'm in bed by 10 every night, I can assure you. I think I found to be involved at the level that's required for me in all these things. So for NLC, yes, I'm a board member. I'm not like the director.
What does that look like, being a board member?
Sure. Actually, that's a great question, because I think that's the first foray most people should have in terms of contributing in their community, is definitely join a board, whether it be a governmental board or non-governmental, in the form of not-for-profit, for example. So that's one way I would often say. There's a thing in sort of the strategic planning for boards thing called the matrix, and you basically see yourself in what I'm contributing. So I have some general political knowledge, right? So I have some knowledge of the environment I'm in. I bring my skills, my artistic creativity skills, my bringing in ingenuity and innovating and things of that nature. I love to write. That's another pastime of mine. It's like a hobby, side hustle of mine is writing. I blog when I have time or can put things together in that way. And in a past life, I did a podcast with a colleague. So like, I think I have this creative juices and I have to express myself. And instead of like, some people design, clothes, others may paint, and mine is like my community service.
Mine's too. Mine, that is, yeah. So, wow. You are very interesting.
Well, thank you. Well, I'm glad I was connected, and like I said, I rarely leave the house. So I said I made the commitment. I think it was the last Wednesday, a couple days ago, and we had a snowstorm because we're in upstate New York. We're tough. we're made of that tough stuff, but we definitely didn't venture out in the snow. And then of course today is like below zero,
freezing.
There's a running joke with me of somehow actions are basically the rallies, protests, or whatever they may be. They tend to happen in the winter because we're in Albany somehow. Because winter is majority of the year, right? So there's a picture of me on the coldest day of 2016, 17, outside with a sign, And there's another year, I think it was 2000. Wait, that may have been 2016, 2017. Again, a very cold day. Around this time, a colleague that's coming in to talk to you, we helped plan this women's march, and it was an intersectional march as opposed to a non-intersectional march. We'll get into that. But again, very cold, but you know what? It did not snow until we were done. I said, the spirit was with us. They were like, we're not going to snow yet. But there's so many pictures of me on cold days with signs and it's like welcome to upstate New York.
So to piggyback off of this March thing you were just mentioned, so fill us in with that.
Sure. Well, basically what happened was, naturally, there was in 2016, a certain gentleman was elected, and there was a women's march that occurred very organically in Albany, and there was already a march being planned. The women's march sort of, was momentum of this sort of understanding what sexism is and the intersection of sexism and racism, what was going on in society. There was a women's march, as we know. It was a beautiful event at large, I think, on a 30,000-foot view, because you're understanding that women often are the political wheelhouse of our nation, really, especially Black women. But women really run the households. We often are the organizers in the communities. The soccer mom is what else but an organizer, right? Mm-hmm. So women tend to do that role, whether it be at schools or in your
so true.
Let's call it even your what do you call that in your apartment, like when everyone's sort of like in a committee together. Even in those, like, women tend to be, that's not a slight to men. Men have their history, we learn it naturally in school, but we don't get told about what women and their contribution on that level. So that took place, and that I think is significant from a historical standpoint. However, once you peel back the layers and you get down to the ground level, what was happening is Black women, Indigenous women, people of color felt spoken over. They felt invisible that day. They did not feel heard in so many ways. It became like a predominant group had their march, and maybe a lot of people involved. I mean, the people who actually structured the Women's March, the National Committee is an intersectional committee. But what happened on the local levels across the world, people felt left out. In Albany, there was an actual different march happening, inaugural resistance, that just coincided with the fact and basically became its own natural women's march. However, what people found in the year to come afterward is that, that was somewhat a lonely experience. And we had this ingenious idea to throw a march. We said, let's reclaim our space. Let's reclaim our time. This was born like over the summer, reading books. My colleague, Amy Jones, we talked about it in a committee that we were in together. And we just built this march, brunch, and rally from the ground up. And it coincided with a women's march. There's a whole story about how it became to be an intersectional Black, Indigenous, people of color march, yes, but we threw that. And again, yes, it was cold outside. We were out there, but it was one of the most beautiful days of my life. And because of what we were talking about ending housing discrimination and, medical racism. Some of the signs said, Corinne taught me. It was basically voices you didn't hear. I made a sign that said Black girls in the hood did it first, because
I like that.
Things are fashionable. There's a phrase like things are ghetto until considered fashionable. Mm-hmm. We tend to be, again, if you extrapolate out, Black people run, move the culture in our society. It's in the commercials, it's in your music. that being said, Black women tend to be tastemakers in that sense, and things that are not fashionable in us become fashionable across the world. So I think we were saying things that, to me, was from a liberation standpoint. You know, like, we can be heard, we can have our own space finally. So, like, when I say I like to contribute in some ways, that's something I contributed to in a small way because many people were a part of it. So many people, so many speakers, so many volunteers, so many people donated food, so many people transported people, and, you know, it was an intersectional thing that we did that I think I won't forget. But like I said, that's why I like to contribute in small ways. Like, you know, I wanted to see that happen, so I contributed to make sure that happened.
So is that something that just happened one time, or does it happen annually?
We haven't had a second one. I just spoke with Amy about how can we recognize people in this pandemic? What can we do? What kind of event? I mean, Amy's thrown definitely things while the pandemic was still happening, like Say Her Name, which, again, marches, people were concerned about super spreader events, but they found, just so you know, listeners, that marches for Black Lives Matter or anything of that nature tend to be low-spreading events because we observe the rules. We're sitting a safe distance apart, but I have my mask. I mask up. You know, stay home. I don't touch things. So,
and I get tested regularly.
Yeah,
Unfortunately.
But, you know, I think it's beautiful to, and I think that's probably a thread in my life, is loving to create, like, events and things of that nature that sort of recognize people and include people and things of that nature. So I want to keep on doing that. I feel like that's where, if that's a talent, I like to do that. I like to create space for people.
That's awesome. That's like me. My mom used to say when I was younger, you would tell anybody they're beautiful. I used to go up to people and be like, touch their face, you so beautiful. And I just love for people to feel good. But Tabetha, before we go, let our viewers know where they can find you.
Okay.
Let them know what platforms you're on or any of that good stuff.
So it's funny because I'm probably going to feel like different people on different platforms. I don't know if you've seen that LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, you know, thing, but I feel like that's literally me. I mean, I guess that's all of us. On Twitter, I'm probably a little more snarky and funny, but I'm at Tabetha Wilson _. So if you start typing Tabetha Wilson, hopefully I come up. Tabetha with an E. I'm on Instagram, the Tabetha Wilson. I'm on Instagram and Facebook under my school board pages. If you're in Albany and you want to find out things, I don't only post about school district stuff, but there's information for the community also. I've started writing briefly, so you can find me on Medium if you look for me. I'm not going to blow up that link because I'm not writing enough for it to be worthwhile. But I'm on Facebook naturally, and you can reach me anywhere if you know how to spell my name.
All right, guys, and you have heard it here first with the beautiful Tabetha. We're going to go and wrap it up. But I'm going to let you guys know now, you can follow Girl Get Up on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, obviously YouTube. If you go to our Facebook page, we'll have Tabetha information there, a link to all her Facebooks and all her media's outlets, and we're gonna get a little sample of her writing too, guys. So stay tuned. If you want to hear any new topics, make sure you guys message me. I like to communicate with my viewers, so tell me guys what you want to hear. Thanks for viewing.